Unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time. If your kid kills you, you automatically have to take the blame. It's your fault. What can I say? You know, there might be, I would say there's no exceptions to those rules, but I don't like to be an absolutist. But, you know, like maybe an exception might be the kid is captured by the military and they hand him a gun and say, you must kill this man. If you don't, I will kill the rest of your family and rape them in front of your face. If your kid kills you at that point, maybe not your fault. You know, maybe you don't get the blame. Otherwise, yeah, to one degree or another, you fucked up. You know, as soon as I've said this all along since the Menendez brothers, you know, watching their court case on TV. I remember telling people, I said, look, if your kids kill you, I don't care what the extenuating circumstances are. It's your fault. You know? Either you molested them, you let somebody else molest them, you didn't care about them, you put something else before them, you didn't raise them with values, you gave them too much leeway, something, blah, 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 blah. It was your fault. You know, you sent them off to school. If they met somebody at school who brainwashed them and you didn't catch it, it's your fault. You weren't paying attention. If you sent them off to church and somebody brainwashed, it doesn't matter. If you weren't paying attention to your kid, your offspring, your property, and they come back and they kill you, and that's, of course, the most extreme version. They could kill somebody else or rob other people, or there's all kinds of terrible things a kid can do to the world, and to a large degree, it is the parents' fault, you know? I think young kids right now are really blaming the boomers and Gen Xers a lot. More the boomers. Boomers are getting a lot of hate. And, of course, some of it's deserved and some of it's not. But the thing that is kind of deserved is that era, for whatever reason, because of World War II or whatever, the end of it, it seems like everybody just kind of wanted to get off the hook. And that's when the free love came in. That's when the me generation came in. And, you know, I see people saying they were the most selfish generation ever. And I go, oh, okay, that might be a little bit much, but there's a tinge of truth there. You know, if you look at the movies, Kramer versus Kramer, you look at the shows, you know, you've come a long way, baby. Feminism goes on the rise. You gotta break free from your family. It's selfishness. You know, it's a selfish outlook. Of course, you know I'm talking about Nick Reiner killing his dad, Rob Reiner, who wasn't a good man. He was a bad man. And it's obvious. Look, I don't think anybody should be shocked by this. I've been watching it, and, you know, because I'm a narcissist, I think of how it relates to me. You know, I think, oh, that one doesn't relate that much. Yeah, I used to chat in the early days of the internet in the late 90s with his assistant. I can't remember what her name was, but there was this program on it called iVisit, I think it was. And you could just, if you had a DSL line, you could video chat or regular chat with people online with no long-distance phone calls. Remember the days of long-distance charges? Well, this was the first day that was over the internet. I mean, in those days, I had a roommate that moved to China for a while, and we actually had an experiment where we leave the lines open so I could hear his house in China and he could hear his room or house here in San Francisco. We left the lines open 24/7. just as an interesting thing. Walking into my house, over the stereo system, I could hear the sounds of China. Looking back, it seems like a weird, I can't leave you be alone, roommate. But really, it was a test of technology. But anyway, one of the people that I met on that program was a woman who claimed to be Rob Reiner's assistant. And she mostly liked him. And she'd talk shit about Bill Clinton because Bill Clinton was coming by a lot. And I thought it was amazing that I was having this online chat. Faceless woman I never met, could have all been a lie, but everything seemed to check out, back then. But I think she was fat. She sounded fat. But so that was my connection to Rob Reiner and Hollywood in general. But nothing, I said in the last recording, the Bondi, it's just weird how small the world is. And I just wonder if it's this small for everybody. I assume it is. Maybe it's a little bit smaller for me. I don't know, because I have a larger network, maybe. And I connected into networks that are ubiquitous to everybody. Like my friend being in Bondi Beach. It's where she grew up, talked to her almost every day. But, and all the other things. But on this one, I thought, okay, well, I'm at least not connected, even though I understand the story a lot, because childhood divorce, multiple marriages, big step family. And as soon as I heard that Rob Reiner's son killed him, it just reminded me of growing up and always wondering if my stepbrother was going to kill me or my mother, or somebody else. He's a violent guy. Well, anyway, this is the fun part. This is the fun part where it all connects again. I decided to watch Being Charlie today. I thought, may as well watch to see how they said. Being Charlie is a movie produced by Rob Reiner and his son, Nick. I guess he wrote it. And it's autobiographical about both of them. But they, fictionalize it. They turn Rob Reiner into a guy running for governor. Look at that fantasy. That should tell you everything you need to know. When Rob Reiner wants to do a fantasy version of him, he's the winner of the governor of California. That's not a surprise. That goes back to Meathead days. It's the way he saw himself. A thin guy trying tough love with his kid. Of course, the movie doesn't get into the childhood or anything like that. It starts off with his kid already being a drug addict for no apparent reason. So really, there's no accountability in this movie, no real accountability for Rob Reiner's character. It's he comes out being I just don't know what to do. I'm trying to do what's right, But anyway, so I search out this movie on a Russian website, because I don't want to pay for it. I don't want a nickel to go to Nick or his dad or his production company. And the very first scene, I go, well, that looks familiar. What the fuck? Where are they? Like the very first scene, I thought, I know that spot. I know that spot. I know that house, that corner. I've been there. And I think Winnemucca. I think that's Winnemucca. I think, because, when I travel from San Francisco to Utah, I drive through Winnemucca a lot. And sometimes I decide to just sleep in Winnemucca in my van, And I thought, I think I've slept out in front of that house. So I look it up. Hey, Grok, where did they film Being Charlie? Oh, Tooele, Utah. Oh, okay. I did know the corner, just placed it wrong. Once I saw it, yeah. So they filmed the whole thing in Utah. And I go, of course they did. Of course they did. Tyler Robinson has to be from Utah. Everything seems to have to just be right now. Of course, this is me being a narcissist, but everything, it's like the forces of the universe are going, yes, it is kind of about you, Merkley. It is actually fair that you're making it about you. This is in Utah. You've been there. You recognize that spot. opening credits, you recognize your stepbrother, your two stepbrothers, your homeless stepbrother who's addicted to meth, who has mugshots that go 10 miles deep. Back when mugshots.com was on, you could Google my stepbrother and you could see like 20 mugshots of him. Handsome guy, hooked on meth, drugs, homeless, violent tendencies. There's so many things, okay? For example, with the Tyler Robinson, goes back to Utah. I've made recordings about this. I don't need to rehash it, but the fact that everything was Utah, that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, probably on the spot where I broke some commandments with my girlfriend. I think they purchased her land, their house. From what I could tell from the satellite photos, I'm like, that's basically where. From recognizing the deer hunting rifle, the sound, the age, everything about the Tyler Robinson thing I related with in more ways than you could ever possibly imagine. And then now, all of a sudden, this thing comes along and I relate with it too, because I have 17 brothers and sisters, and 18 total with me. And I recognize the drug addiction and the violence and the homelessness and the in and out of rehabs from one of my stepbrothers, and just off and on homelessness with one of my stepbrothers. And I used to know Rob Reiner's assistant. But anyway, I'm watching this movie. The first scene ends. I figured out it's Utah. There's other streets. I go, I know that street. Right? The kid goes back to California, walks into the house, sees his mom and dad. He's, hey, what's up? Here's a bathroom, flush toilet. And out comes an actor playing the part of an interventionist. Portly fella. And I go, I know that guy. That's Christopher Robin Miller. That's my neighbor. And it was my neighbor. I knew it immediately. I thought they're filming in Utah. Utah probably has a thing where you have to cast a Utah actor. But there's Christopher Robin Miller, my neighbor. And he's not just any neighbor, okay? He's my mom's best friend's kid. He's the kid, a year younger than me, who, with him and his sister and his poodle, I got driven to school every day through junior high and high school. End of junior high, beginning of high school. That kind of guy. Not just a guy, but Christopher Robin Miller. A guy who was cast in a show called Kids Incorporated. I don't know if you know that show. But he got me an audition for Kids Incorporated, or his mom did, because I was an actor. We were in Hello Dolly together, and Christopher was kind of annoying because he took dance lessons. His mom was really committed to him being an entertainer. He went to, he was this Hollywood kid in West Jordan, Utah. His mom always had perfect bouffant hair. His dad, Robin Miller, dressed exactly like Mr. Furley. Onesies, with the clip-on belt in front. But I went and auditioned for Kids Incorporated at Osmond Studios in Provo, Utah. So Provo, Utah, Osmond Studios is where I auditioned, and I didn't get the part. I was 16 going on 17, Kids Incorporated. The part that I was auditioning for was for the Soda Jerk. They took me behind a set, the bar that I was going to stand behind, and I was a little too tall, and they had a discussion of how they could raise the bar, make the bar taller, which would make me look shorter, more like a kid, but I already had a mustache kind of growing in, I didn't get the part. But Christopher did, and he filmed the whole first season, I think, of Kids Incorporated in that building. And they promised him, that whole idea was that Kids Incorporated would stay in Utah and blah, blah, blah. But they pulled the rug out and moved to California, and I don't think Christopher got to go. But here he is on screen about this movie that I was already trying to say, well, this one can't relate to my life too. But not only is he the rehab artist or the rehab interventionist, rehab artist, that's a good term, but next to the Osmond Studios is a well-known rehab school where famous people send their kids. I think Paris Hilton went there, but so did my stepbrother, the violent one I was telling you about, the one who I found out right before my mom passed, after she had her stroke. I found out that they were worried. My mother and stepdad were worried that my stepbrother would murder me. They had an intel that suggested that there was a likelihood that I would be murdered by my stepbrother. And that was why he was sent to this Provo Canyon rehab facility. And again, this is the storyline of Nick Reiner too. I think he may have gone to that rehab facility. I don't know. But lots of famous people did. I can tell you it did nothing for my stepbrother. He just went in and he met a bunch of criminals. And when he got out, he had more criminal friends. And I think that's kind of the story they tell in this movie too. I watched the whole thing, but they had more like little halfway houses kinds of things, but not the big facility. Anyway, the interesting part is that Provo Canyon rehab facility is literally right next door to Osmond Studios. They share a parking lot. And there's other stories too. Osmond Studios, my first mentor, he wanted me to be a famous artist. He drew photorealistic things with a pencil. And one of the things that was amazing is when I went to my audition at Osmond Studios, there was a portrait that he had drawn of Marie Osmond with a pencil hanging up in the room. So he was already getting huge commissions from the Osmonds also. The Osmond brothers were in my mother's ward in Calgary, the deaf ones. Anyway, I'm just saying, small world shit, okay? But so this rehab facility is next door to the Osmond Studios. Years later, when I'm at Provo and BYU, I'm promoting concerts at Osmond Studios because it's no longer Osmond Studios. It becomes a venue, possible venue, and I'm the one that I approached them. I said, maybe we could do some concerts here. And we ended up doing some concerts. I did the English Beat, the Specials, my band, filmed what should have been a music video with the guy ran off with our money. Anyway, during those concerts, the problem is that the rehab facility didn't like it because the parking lot would get full with teenagers, and a lot of teenagers, before they go to concerts, will drink alcohol, right? So right next to this rehab facility, you have these concerts going on with kids in the parking lot having a lot of fun getting drunk. And the rehab people are looking out of their windows at that. So needless to say, the rehab facility didn't like this. And so they sued and tried to get my concerts and my events and all events at the Osmond Studios, which was renamed something else. I can't remember what it was at that time. I always just called it Osmond Studios. But the guy who represented the city or the neighborhood association and the Provo Canyon rehab was none other than Alan Merkley, my cousin. So when we had to fight at city council in Orem, this is a literal thing. By the way, Orem, Utah Valley is the setting for Footloose. And I told people for many years that I lived the real life Footloose, trying to promote concerts and being shut down at every turn, no matter where I was. And in fact, at this particular meeting, where it was Alan Merkley versus me, the other Merkley, I was saying, if you don't give these kids something to do, they just go out and get pregnant. That's why Utah Valley has one of the highest pregnancy rates, because you don't give them anything to do. Anyway, that's just a fun little snippet. Merkley versus Merkley at the Orem City Hall. Me testifying in favor of dancing. Him testifying against it. Anyway, another little side note is that the person that was giving me the most trouble in the parking lot of these events was my friend Dwayne, who would get drunk and scream and yell at his girlfriend, who's now his wife, in the parking lot. So anyway, but that's where my stepbrother went to do rehab, and I imagine that's where Nick went to do rehab. My older stepbrother never ended up killing anybody. I was actually talking to my sister a little while ago about how it was interesting that he didn't become a violent criminal. Somehow, I don't know, I don't have contact with him, don't want to have contact with him. But he avoided prison. He went to jail a lot, but he avoided prison. And I would have predicted that he would have ended up killing somebody. In fact, he stole. Remember I told the story about how my first deer I killed with a rifle and there was no exit wound, and this is how I relate with Tyler Robinson, how it all made sense to me. Well, this stepbrother stole that rifle from my parents' home. And when you think about him stealing my stuff, the story is he and the other street stepkid would steal stuff all the time from the house. They would come back, kind of like this movie with Nick and Rob Reiner. They would break into the house, steal things, and go off and support their drug habits or whatever the fuck else they were doing. That's just part of, any of you guys that have drug-addicted relatives or friends know about that. You don't trust people that are on drugs. They will steal your shit. But anyway, so I would have related with this movie if there was any honesty to it. I relate with the story, not necessarily the movie. The movie was bullshit. It was a crappy movie, obviously an attempt for Rob to repaint himself as a hero somehow, or at any rate, the reality is he was capitalizing on his son's problems. Oh, I know, we can make a movie about it. We can cash in. And we can go do a tour, a father-son tour, and I can win Father of the Year. Anyway, remember, this is a guy, Rob Reiner. I know I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but this is a guy who was scheduled to meet with the Obamas the night after he got murdered. And let me just tell you what that meeting was going to be about. It was going to be about destroying Donald Trump and destroying all Donald Trump's voters. That's what it was going to be about. That's what that meeting was going to be about, for them to strategize. How do we stop regular good people? How do we meathead this whole world? That's what that meeting was going to be about. But you don't see right-wingers celebrating Nick Reiner like they celebrated Luigi or celebrated Tyler Robinson. They could be, because we don't know what he stopped. There's so many biblical kind of angles about this. If you want to look at it, it could be argued that Rob Reiner was probably one of Donald Trump's most powerful and influential detractors. His influence, just even with the great movies and the sympathy that he was able to build through his body of work that is beloved, that was able to bring many people into his fold and his point of view, his meathead point of view. Rob Reiner appointed himself to be that person, to be that governor, that political figure. That's how he saw himself, and that's how he behaved. meeting with the Obamas, you know. There's a possibility that Nick Reiner saved a lot of bullshit. And you could say Nick Reiner, or you could say maybe God did it. I know, controversial. How dare you, Merkley? How dare you? Well, let me remind you what I say about God, what I think God is, okay? In my view, God is reality. Reality is God. You can't escape God because you can't escape reality. You can try to be like Meathead and make a movie, a fictional version of your life that doesn't contain all of the reality. It's got little bits of it, little parts of truth, but the whole thing is bullshit. The real thing is, he spent his whole career championing, enabling. Like, even if you go back to All in the Family, Archie versus Meathead, Archie was accountability. And remember, they wrote him to be a villain. Turns out the world loved him because they actually like accountability. Most people realize that God and accountability, aka reality, are inseparable, that you must embrace reality. That's what accountability is. It's the laws of physics. This happens, then this happens. If you do this, this will happen. There will be consequences if you do this. Well, artists, they like to run away from accountability. That's what fantasy is. No accountability. That's what flat earthers, they don't want accountability. They don't want to have to figure things out. They just want to reject. No accountability for anything, you know? And so he spent his whole life trying to avoid reality, avoid God, preaching against it vehemently. But it caught up with him. He had his throat slit by the reality that he created for himself and his family. I can't speak for the other kids, whatever, and humans are resilient, and miracles happen every day, and some people are raised under terrible circumstances, and they end up being all right, and I do believe in free will and all that good stuff. But Rob Reiner ended up dying at the hands of his own making, literally, his own child. You know, that's biblical. Donald Trump's children love him, defend him at every turn. Some are a little camera shy. Tiffany, she came from the second mom. She doesn't show up as much, but seems to love him. Everybody seems to love him. His grandchildren love him. He's got a niece that's bitter and trying to get some airtime, but I don't think she even knows him. You know? So you got Trump's kids that love him. You got Rob Reiner, the biggest detractor, produced Stephen King movies. Stand By Me, great movie. Stephen King story. You know, they hate him. They hate him. They hate Donald Trump. They hate his children. But yet Rob Reiner's kid murdered him. You know? So yeah, my life was weird. Growing up with multiple divorces and having families crammed together, and believe it or not, bless my mom's heart, you know, I'm not trying to sit here and blame everything on parents, but it's cause and effect. It's consequences. If you do this, if you go carelessly into marriage and then divorce and start other families and then get yourself underwater and you have too many kids and you bite off more than you can chew, your children are going to suffer. And if you're championing all the things, if you just think of the Meathead speeches you think about Archie criticizing drug addicts and perverts, and you think of the speech that Michael Stipic, Meathead, would give to Archie. He wasn't acting. You know, that wasn't an act. That's how he really was. Making excuses for crime. Making excuses for not living in a way where you own your consequences of your deeds. Really, that's the difference. It's the difference. The good people are accountable, bad people aren't. A mason is accountable. If he doesn't stack the wall right, it falls down and people die. If Rob Reiner makes a shitty movie, nothing happens. Nobody cares. Somebody loses a little bit of money. There's no accountability. It's also why they flock to politics and academia, the lefties, because there's no accountability. You just write the book. You fart out an idea. You have an opinion. But there's nothing that really happens. The accountability is invisible. The accountability comes when Tyler Robinson shoots Charlie Kirk in the neck because you trained him and you brainwashed him to do that. You told him that white people are evil. You told him being straight is evil. You told him that human beings are ruining the world. So he took action. Cause, effect. Cause and effect. Rob, you taught your kid. You showed the values. The values that Nick had were the values that you instilled into him. It's not a surprise that he slit your throat. God did that. And I'm not talking the guy with the white beard in the sky. I'm saying reality did that. There are consequences. And before you go, yeah, but there's so many good parents. No, stop. There aren't other Rob Reiners in the world, okay? Rob Reiner is in a very unique position. That's why it seems like a biblical story. There aren't people that pursue those positions in the world. The power, the influence, the media, the manipulation, the brainwashing. That's what movies are. Okay, that's all they are. You're either brainwashing somebody into goodness or you're brainwashing them into badness. Is badness even a word? But it's true. That's what you're doing. You're either giving them something that's edifying or you're trying to remove them from the consequences of their deeds. You're trying to make, oh, you didn't do it, honey. You didn't do it, honey. You didn't mean it. He's a good boy. You're a good boy. You can almost hear Rob saying that right now. And by the way, again, this is what I don't like about Christianity. This forgiving. This, oh, you're just good. You're still good. You just did bad. You just slit somebody's throat. You're still a good boy. All right. You go with that. No. You're evil when you do evil. When you commit evil. So, anyway, all these different tie-ins to having Christopher Robin Miller pop up on the screen in my childhood, tied in with the actual Provo Canyon thing. Thank goodness nobody in my family murdered anybody, but it came close. I could have been Nick. I told the story. I'll tell it again. You know, the time that this particular stepbrother, the violent one that my mom and my stepdad thought that was going to murder me. So they sent him to the Provo school, the same one that Nick went to. One time he was at the house and trying to encourage my younger stepbrother, who was a good guy, still a fantastic fella. He was trying to encourage him to do something to break some sort of commandment. And I was getting ready to go on my mission at the time. So I was full on and preachy, goody two-shoes, white savior mode. And I went out into the kitchen and I told this particular stepbrother, I said, why don't you get the fuck out of here? Just because you live a shitty life doesn't mean you have to make everybody else's life shitty. Something like that. Something to those words of, and he was bigger than me, tougher than me, could easily kick my ass. He had kicked my ass a number of times, bigger, taller, stronger, meaner, a lot meaner. And he had a look on his face when I told him that, like, he stood up in my face, Hollywood movie style. just threatening me. I don't think he said anything, but he went out and he leaned on my VW Bug, my 66 VW Bug with a bra on it. It had a bra on it, those black bras. And he leaned up against it because he knew I had to go somewhere. He didn't want to beat me up in the house. So he leaned up against my car to basically say, I'm going to beat the shit out of you when you come out of the house. So I grabbed that same rifle that's in question, the one that makes me relate with the Tyler Robinson, the first deer, the no exit wound. I grabbed the rifle and I was sitting there in my mom's office. It was on the first floor. She used it to sell Shackley, which was an Avon type competitor, health supplements and stuff. And I had it and I loaded it. And I stood there because I thought, I don't know, he might come in here. And if he does come in here. Anyway, I picked up the phone. I dialed 911. And I said, my stepbrother's sitting on my car right now. You know who he is. I gave the name. And I said, I'm holding a gun right now. It's loaded. And if he steps foot in this house and comes after me, I'm going to blow his face off. That's what I said to the 911 people. Anyway, I couldn't believe how fast they got there. They got there within, I swear, it couldn't have been more than a minute. It was like 30 seconds they were there. They didn't knock on the door. They didn't talk to me. They just put him in the cop car and took him away because they knew who he was. He was always in trouble with the law. One of the first songs I ever wrote was I Almost Killed My Stepbrother. Terrible song, by the way. Lyrics are they're too on the money. And I'm a terrible singer, and it was just not a good song. But anyway, narcissist me, that's how all these events are kind of just curling up on me and just going, wow, why does everything have to be touching the Utah thing? Why does the Nick story, why does the Rob Reiner story have to be Utah? Why does it have to be so close to my own personal experiences with the Osmond Studios, with Christopher Robin Miller, Like really close, not a guy I met, a guy I drove to school with all the time. My mom's best friend's kid. He's in that movie about a guy who's on drugs and ultimately kills somebody. Well, look, this stepbrother of mine, he can't kill my parents because they're dead. They died of natural causes. And he probably wouldn't have because my parents, for their faults, also had good qualities, They weren't like Rob Reiner, They weren't like, they didn't have the money and the fame and the ability to just use their power over their son. And I'm not saying that's what they did, but it looks like it to me, When you talk about the jealousy and the resentment that a kid has for his father, and that's what the reports are, and you talk about the way he was talking at Conan O'Brien's party. Oh, by the way, this is just another fun little tie-in I have here. It's a fun little tie-in was when I listen to Conan O'Brien all the time, his show. I told you the story about how I wrote my name under his desk in the Rockefeller Plaza, what do you call it, the NBC studios. I snuck in, I wrote my name under his desk. But the other story I had was that another friend of mine that was in a band toured with a band called Smash Mouth, told me a really good story about how one night at a Christmas party, at a Conan O'Brien Christmas party, Conan got really drunk and yelled at my friend, And ever since that, I was like, I've had a tainted view of Conan. You don't think of Conan as being this angry drunk. But the story that was told to me by my friend, who was on tour with Smash Mouth, was that he was a very angry drunk that yelled inches from his face and told, "This is my party." So when I hear the stories of Nick doing that, you know, Nick Reiner basically going up to people at the party. His questions apparently, allegedly, were, what's your first name, what's your last name, and are you famous? To me, there's even a biblical quality about that, because this is the night before the murder, or the night of the murder. I don't know the exact timeline, but it sounds like Reiners are get embarrassed, right? So they leave the party. We should have never brought this kid to the party. What an embarrassment to us. We got to get the fuck out of here. Nick leaves the party after having a fight with Bill Hader, apparently. And he goes and murders him. But the things he was saying is, what's your first name, what's your last name, and are you famous? Those are some pretty poignant questions coming from a kid. They don't seem like questions, actually. They seem like statements, you know? Like, I'm sure that he knew these people were famous, but the message is, what is your first name? What is your last name? These are fundamental questions. Who are you? I think Larry King used to do that to people. Who's the other interviewer that does that? Who are you? Oh, Jesse Lee Peterson does stuff like that. You know, these mindfuck questions like, who are you? Well, my name is Merkley. No, but who are you? Well, I'm a white guy. No, but who are you? You can ask that question in a way that creates real existential thoughts in a person, and that kind of sounds like what he was doing. What's your first name? What's your last name? And are you famous? You know? And by the way, I've been having lots of problems with Conan O'Brien over the last years. I want to just love him, but there's things that I don't like about him, and part of it is knowing this story about him being a hothead, and also watching how he can't be the guy. He can't not have the spotlight. That's obvious about him. That's one of the things we like about him. But also, I feel like because of his Catholic upbringing, he understands what's right. And when I hear him kowtowing and sucking, kissing ass to lefties, it feels totally performative and phony to me. Because his knowledge as presidents and all that other stuff, it feels like he is intentionally ignoring his actual values and trading them in for cowardice, for popularity, to be liked. He admits this about himself. He needs to be loved. He needs to make people love him. And I think he's a classic example of a person who probably has sold out his values entirely in order to be liked. I think if most of the people in Hollywood were conservative, Conan would be pretending to be conservative, or maybe actually being conservative, because I feel like he might have some values underneath all that. Anyway, that's a tangent. But it's all just kind of biblical. Everything ties in, I have my Conan stories. I've been to Conan. Conan kicked me out of his studio. Conan himself kicked me out of his studio. Well, he didn't manhandle me, but when I was sitting in there, I was with the band and they were performing, and I thought I'd sneak in and just watch the rehearsals. I've told this story before too. I'm watching the rehearsals up there by myself. I think somebody else from the group came with me, like, I don't know, one of the other roadies or something, or maybe even somebody else from I don't think anybody from the band was in the audience with me, but we were just obviously sitting up there, and Conan was behind his desk, the one that I wrote my name underneath later on a different visit. But he was playing guitar, and they were just kind of setting the lights up and whatever, and he looked up, and he goes, "Who are you guys?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just here with No Doubt," And he kind of motions to the producer, and the producer turns around and goes, "You guys can't be in here. You guys got to get out." So yeah, Conan himself kicked me out. Yeah, And it's weird. And I have to say, there's some sort of poetry here where I like right now that Conan O'Brien and his fans and his people are all they must, they have been forced into confronting their values. Conan must be in an existential place right now, thinking about his own children, thinking about Hollywood, thinking about Rob. They're thinking about Meathead. They're thinking about how the vitriol, the hatred, the venom that Rob Reiner and that crowd has spewed, the arrogance, the smugness. That's what they don't show in this movie. There's no hint of that. There's no hint of Rob Reiner's character in this movie going around for eons and eons just talking down and badly about actually good fathers, Midwestern Republican people who didn't go to school. They're not meatheads. They're not talking about education, literature, intellectualism like Meathead. That's what Meathead and Gloria were all about. Now, these were the workers, like the Archie Bunkers. For years, they have just slandered the Archie Bunkers of the world as beneath them, as stupid, as having bad values, as racist, sexist, homophobes. Everything you saw him saying about Archie Bunker, Rob, as the quarterback of that team, have been doing towards the rest of the world. We're better. We're the good parents. We have the love. You people are racist. You people, it's all you. You people you're the scum. Rush Limbaugh, the vile, hateful person. It's a better world now that you're dead. And they didn't get the benefit of Rob Reiner being murdered by a MAGA man or anybody. No, he was murdered by his own son. A person that they all knew. A person that was at Conan's party. All the people at the Conan O'Brien Christmas party, that'll tell you something too. Conan still has the Christmas in him. He still does. He threw a Christmas party. He didn't throw a holiday party. So there is a bit of... Anyway, he was at the party and he went home after saying, "Who are you? What's your first name? What's your last name? Are you famous?" And I want them to be pondering these things. I know I have been, Sometimes it bothers me because it seems like the left don't ponder. They just pass off the blame. Well, you're uneducated. You didn't do this. You fucking non-mask wearing. You're killing grandma with your breath. You're evil. But now all of these people have to confront reality. Reality is visiting their doorstep. How long will it visit them? How will they pay attention to it? What will they do with this, biblical occasion? It's not looking good. It's not looking good. Hell, you've got conservatives like James Woods chastising Donald Trump for not being sad that a man who tried to destroy him got killed by his own kid. I mean, poetic justice is the word, the phrase that everybody must be contemplating, the way they wanted to contemplate with Charlie Kirk's murder. That's what they were saying. They were saying poetic justice. He wanted guns, so he was killed by a gun. But of course, don't make me go over the reasons why Rob Reiner and Charlie Kirk are not the same. They couldn't be more different. They're night and day. Charlie Kirk was a man doing good work, talking about reality, explaining reality, pushing the idea of God, reality, consequences. If you tell kids this, they will slice off their dicks. And I assume you wanted them to do that. You got to know that Conan and Rob Reiner and that group haven't been out trying to keep people from slicing off their dicks and their tits. No, they've been enabling it. They're enablers. Meathead is an enabler. Go back and watch All in the Family. Everything that Archie Bunker said was about consequences. Everything that Meathead said was about enabling and escaping consequences. And now he's dead. And so is his wife. Anyway, it's not so bad news. I'm not here to celebrate any of this because it's all bad news. It's bad news that Rob Reiner was set on this path. I don't know Carl Reiner, his dad. How much did he get from that? You know, that sickness in Hollywood. You know, you wanna be kind to the people that have set out to try to make you laugh, but it's not all about laughs. Life isn't all about laughs. Laughs are good. And by the way, laugh, the joke, it's just saying something real. That's all you got to do. If you get in the right environment, if you want to make somebody laugh, say something real in a situation that won't get them punched, because that's where the laugh comes from. The danger of saying the real thing without the consequence of getting punched for saying the real thing, because you're in an environment where you're allowed to laugh. The laugh is literally a response to the relief of not getting punched. Okay? I know because I just laughed because I didn't get punched for saying that. Anyway, so yeah, here you go. That's enough of me yapping. There are probably 1,000 different other ways that while I was watching that movie, of how weirdly it ties into my life in kind of a biblical way. You know, I was half expecting, I don't know how you can get better than that, seeing your neighbor lives right around the corner, in the same neighborhood, right around the corner. 40-second walk. Let's call it a 40-second walk to get to Christopher Robin Miller's house, to get in their Volvo and go to school. Anyway, that's enough of my yapping. Thanks for listening. Unnecessary outro song to totally waste